was that at the end of the program, at the end of the construction, there would be 20 journeyman masons coming out of Peguis, which was kind of a neat high bar to expect a new, one new building to achieve. But that's where, the connection between when we plan and we design and we construct well, the purpose of the construction, the purpose of the building is a lot more than just making a building. It's actually about making a community. It's actually about making a future for those young people who became tradesmen and were able to then continue on and use their skills in so many other places. So now we're on to the sixth one, moving in and celebrating. And I like that this aligns with the teaching of humility, because when you finally open a building, it is a bit of a humbling moment. And I think any of you who are practitioners know that, just to see the building kind of completed, to see people moving in, there is a real sense of humility, because you're really part of co-creating something that is going to be there for a very long time, and that somehow is given over to the custody of the community. And so it has to be something that people want to celebrate, but also something that people want to take ownership of. And so it's kind of a neat moment. I want to share a little bit about the story of Amisquichy. This is the Aboriginal High School in Edmonton. It's actually, this was from the grand opening. This building actually used to be the municipal air terminal building in Edmonton a long time ago. And when the school board decided that they were going to build an Aboriginal high school, they realized that they couldn't build it from scratch. They needed an existing building, but there wasn't a school building available. So we worked with them to try to find a building in the community that was vacant and available and 80,000 square feet. You can imagine that there's not that many 80,000 square feet buildings just sitting around vacant. But the old municipal air terminal building, which of course had recently closed, happened to be available. And it happened that we had actually done the very last renovation of it before it closed as an airport. So it was kind of a funny kind of circular story to come back and re-renovate a building that we had just done renovating. Again, it was about co-creating community. And right from the beginning of the planning at Amisquichy, we started with, what does this mean? Why are we creating this Aboriginal school? It's a junior senior high school. It was kind of neat to fit it into an air terminal building because, all those baggage rooms really make great shop spaces, right? And like really robust environments that make perfect school. So it was kind of a neat transformation. But again, we started with, just an imagining, a dreaming, a visioning process. So as you can see, these stories are kind of circular, and I guess that's a little bit what we've learned, is that all of these stories connect, whether they're stories about grand openings or stories about dreaming or about design or about construction. They really do kind of keep looping around and around. So there's Amisquichy, and that's the main entry of it, with its patterns on the floor that reflect the many different First Nations communities that this school is meant to serve. So it's not Cree, it's not Dene, it's not Soto. It's kind of a composite set of images that reflect the visions of many of the different nations that come to this particular school. And I guess the seventh element of the story, of the circle of the story, is really the evaluation, right? And we often talk, in the world of architecture, we talk about evaluating buildings, post-occupancy evaluations, reviewing how we've done. And it's harder to do that than to talk about it. But we do make it our practice to continue to come around and visit. This is the Greenstone Government of Canada building in Yellowknife. And this particular part of the story relates to the teaching of honesty. So I thought that was kind of a neat alignment as well. So, after humility of opening a building, there's the honesty of evaluating. How did we do anyways? Did we really achieve what we set out to achieve? Did we miss the mark? How could we do better the next time? Actually that image was really the facility manager, the ladies on the right, was there giving us a tour of the building and showing us what was working well for her and elements that she thought could have been better, but mostly she was pretty happy. This greenstone building was actually kind of a neat opportunity because it is the first LEED Gold building north of 60. We also had the opportunity to integrate a lot of photovoltaics into it. It's a building that performs extremely well. It's basically net zero water. It has creates enough water from its rainwater, has a green roof. It's got a lot of high performance building envelope, and it's a delightful, comfortable environment for Government of Canada employees for 13 different departments. So it's a lot of different groups that occupy this building, including, as you see, the forces. And it was also interesting when we did the grand opening, speaking of grand openings, that, at the grand opening they invited a Haida drummer, which is really unusual in the Dene community. But I think it was just really to speak to the fact that this larger First Nations connection across all of Canada is what was really of value to the Government of Canada, and really the story that they wanted to share. So in fact, the lady that's standing in the background there was the Deputy Minister at the time, and their whole program and plan was to bring together so many communities in this Government of Canada building so that this building would reflect the values and vision of so many of the nations, not just the nations that are typically in the Yellowknife area. And everybody had fun with the photovoltaics that you can see sticking above the drummer's head. So it's kind of a neat juxtaposition of very old and very new sort of strategies. So ultimately, I guess, having gone kind of around the circle, I think what's really important again is to say I think architecture and the planning and design and working with First Nations really teaches us that in some ways everything that we do as architects is about embodying the stories of our time, of our community, of the particular and of the general, right? Of the particular needs of that particular occupant of the building, but actually also of the aspirations of the larger community. This image is from Alberta at the Smithsonian. So a few years ago, the Government of Alberta held an event on the Mall in Washington. It was a week-long celebration of the art and culture of Alberta, and again, a sharing of the stories. And so we put together a team of architects who did an exhibition about Alberta architecture and urban design and planning, and many of us took turns at the booth sharing that aspect of Alberta culture. But it was also kind of fun because we were, as part of this festival, we were staying in a hotel where we got to meet many of the other colleagues, artists, performers, collaborators from across Alberta who had been invited to be part of this showcase. And so this young lady, Cecile, was a dancer who had come also from Alberta to share her art form. And there were so many people from across the province who actually made the trek to Washington to occupy the entire Mall of Washington and to share what was going on culturally in our province. It was kind of neat to, again, reflect on how we share stories and how the work that we do as architects really stays with the community. It stays around a long time. And so it's really important that the stories that we embody in that work really reflect and resonate for a very long time. More recently, we've been working with the Yellowhead Tribal College, again, a group that we've been working with for many years, and trying to connect them to a new home in the city. And again, working on planning, working on collaboration, working on bringing people together to find shared stories that they want to share with the larger community. And we just got approval from the mayor of Edmonton last week to proceed with the planning of moving this college into a building in Edmonton that's going to be vacated by MacEwan University, which is moving into a new building. So these stories have been going around for a long time, and we keep coming back to the beginning. So coming back to the beginning, I guess, with the courage to share the vision, with the love to share the planning, with the wisdom to share our knowledge of design, with the respect to share our understanding of putting things together, of detailing, of assembling, of making materials come together, with the moments of truth that come from building, from making buildings, and with the celebrations and humility that come together at the time when we move from construction into occupying those buildings. And finally, to that honesty that we need to have, I think, as architects and as planners, to say, how are we doing? Are we really doing well? I think these 7 stories about architecture, I think, inform how we think about our work, inform how you might want to explore. And I'm really interested to hear, actually, from many of you, what kind of questions this brings to mind for you. Because actually, just earlier this week, I met with a friend who's the recently retired president of Wabasca University, and he and I are collaborating potentially on a book about some of these ideas around how we integrate our thinking about First Nations planning and design and construction into the larger conversation. So I'd be really curious to hear your questions and your ideas and your suggestions about this framing and about the kind of work that we've been doing and how it might inform the kinds of thought you have about design and architecture. I guess ultimately the framing that we really enjoy is that idea that what we do, whatever we plan, whatever we design, whatever we think about, is really to be thought about in the 7th generation. And there are a lot of writers who talk about stories. Ben Okri is another one who suggests that in this fractured age, when cynicism is God, here is a possible heresy. We live by stories, and we also live in them. So I want to thank you, and I want to open this up to some questions about the stories and about what's important to you about some of these stories and what you think might be interesting to hear about further. So open to questions.